You know that strange feeling you get when something doesn't feel right? The night before my wedding, mine struck. Instead, I followed it right into a moment that would tear my world apart. I wish I could say I disregarded it like any other nervous bride. That night, I wasn't supposed to be at the Grand Hotel. With pricey cigars, private rooms, expensive liquor, and the typical charming foolishness for rich guys playing maturity like Monopoly, Harrison and his friends had taken over the lounge for his bachelor party. My intention was to remain at home, get some rest, practice my promises. However, I neglected to provide him with the cufflinks. His mother gave us his grandfather's, which was flawless and polished, for the ceremony. After grabbing the velvet box and throwing a coat over my pajamas, I made my way to the hotel where we had essentially resided during our engagement, which was 4 blocks away. I know the employees. They were familiar with me. There, we held fundraisers. They simply waved me through. I heard it at that point. That chuckle, Harrison's, out loud, intoxicated. Blake, his walking frat guy stereotype and best man, came next. Dude, hurry up. You don't really intend to marry Sophia, do you? Why not? Harrison said. She's ideal on paper, in a tone so casual that it made me shudder. I can still feel the shiver running down my spine as he uttered that, the way my fingers tightened their hold on the box. My entire neurological system seemed to sense that I was going to hear something that I would never be able to unhear. Her trust money is revolutionary, opens doors. Her father's connections are invaluable. And, man, she worships me. It's simple. Blake chuckled. She's the long game then? Harrison laughed. No, she is only here temporarily, until a better person arrives, someone who truly fits over the long haul. My knees remained firm. They ought to have. In movies, women do just that. They drop the box, give a dramatic scream, and flee in tears. I didn't. There I stood, still, keeping an eye on the door, and something hardened within of me. I was just labeled a stepping stone by the man I thought I would marry in 12 hours. A stand-in, a way to achieve a goal. I was not going to cry, though. I intended to bury him. Just before midnight, I arrived home. I'm still wearing my coat. The cufflink box is still in hand. I opened my laptop and poured a glass of wine. You see, Harrison and I were more than simply lovers. I worked for him, in a technical sense, lawfully, enough to access his files at the administrator level. He never gave it a second consideration. I was devoted, and I was, but not in the sense he believed. I had everything by dawn. The shell businesses, the accounts that are located abroad, the imaginative bookkeeping, emails he exchanged with his mistress, his business partner, everything. I got my hair done the following morning. My cosmetics. I slipped into my handmade gown, which was floor length, made of champagne silk, and had hidden pockets a quirky bride request. Bless my intuition. His mother, Diana, presented me the bouquet while crying, pink roses and white peonies. She had no idea the bouquet would shortly become my war flag, so I grinned. My bridesmaids flitted about like Prosecco-induced butterflies. His sister Claire was standing behind me, fumbling with my veil. She murmured, "You're going to blow his mind." I grinned. "Oh," I replied. "I intend to. This is the SMS I received at 11:43 a.m. The evidence is in place. A reporter is on duty." I excused myself. In the marble bathroom, I locked myself and gazed at my reflection. My wedding gown had lost its romantic vibe. It had the feel of armor. War paint is how I describe my crimson lipstick. I took a final look at the screenshots on my phone, including the wire transfers, the affair, and the strategy to force tiny investors into bankruptcy following the merger. I then slipped the manila packet, which was filled with damaging facts, into my gown's pocket. It's time for the wedding. The music began. Canon in D. With all eyes on me, I moved slowly and alone. Standing at the altar, Harrison grinned like a man who was going to receive an unfair reward. He was 5 minutes away from complete disaster, but he was unaware of it. I walked steadily. There was silence in my heart. But as I got closer, I could feel my anger growing, not only toward him, but also toward myself, for nearly thinking I was safe in the company of a pawn. 3 paces distant. 2. He extended his hand to touch mine. "You look beautiful," he murmured. I retreated half a step. I then faced the throng. I said in a steady, clear voice, "I'd like to share some readings before we begin. It comes from Harrison's personal emails, not the Bible, dated during the duration of our engagement." Shocks. Changing. Blake became pale. His board member and mistress, Rebecca, writhed in the front row. I took out the first paper. In the quiet, the shredding of the envelope sounded like a gunshot. I read, "My dearest Rebecca, we can move forward with our strategy as soon as the wedding secures the merger and Sophia's trust fund becomes available. She has no suspicions." Anarchy. Whispers. People are whispering. Diana stood up with surprise. I wasn't finished yet. In that church, you could have heard a pin drop. The wedding suddenly became a tribunal as the package opened and the seal cracked. The first email was like a piece of scripture to me. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't in tears. I sounded calm, perhaps too calm. "She has no suspicions." He said those things. Montgomery Harrison, groom of the hour and future CEO. At least 4 phones are now up and recording, and the topic is already the focus of side eyes and collective gasps. At first, he attempted to laugh it off. That apprehensive, affluent laugh people make when they still believe they have control of the situation. But I continued. "After the merger, we have breathing room thanks to the trust money. Until we make a decision, I'll keep her close." People began to move. The mistress, Rebecca Matthews, clenched her jaw and crossed her knees. The best man, Blake, looked away from me. Behind me, Claire, my darling Claire, stood motionless, her bouquet quivering. I turned to face Harrison. He had lost his smile. He opened his mouth slightly, but nothing came out. The enchantment was gone. It was replaced with a wild animal. In a corner, he took a step forward. "Sophia, we can." I took a step back. "Just one step. Keep your hands off of me." "Is there anyone interested in learning more about the offshore accounts?" I said, raising my voice. "Or maybe the fabricated investment reports. I brought duplicates, so don't worry." For each pew, the rear doors opened with a groan. Just as expected, 2 SEC officers entered the room, their faces unreadable and their suits pressed. As though in a dance, the crowd turned. Diana let out a gasp. Claire spoke something in a whisper, but I couldn't hear. Harrison sprang for the papers I was holding. "It's too late." Like feathers in a storm, I dropped them. Emails, transfer confirmations, and financial reports were among the documents that fluttered down. His entire empire of lies, printed on white paper and black ink, a snowstorm of dishonesty. And he stood in the center of it, encircled by ruin and roses. He screamed and grabbed my wrist, saying, "Please, this is something we can resolve. Avoid doing this here." I took a full step back and wrenched out of his hold. I spoke what I had practiced 1,000 times in my mind after looking him in the eye. "You referred to me as transitory. You and your pals laughed about it. You cheated, lied, and manipulated. Harrison, this is more than simply a breakup. This is your reckoning." His face turned gray instead of crimson. Diana stood in the front row. "Harrison?" Her voice cracked as she said, "What is she discussing?" I yelled, "Tell her. Inform her about the Cayman Islands Shell Corporation. Or how Rebecca's role has extended beyond her role on the board. Or how you intended to ruin your own family's company in order to get a quick stock boost." He remained silent. However, the quiet cried out. Claire spoke tremblingly as she moved forward. "Sophia, is this accurate?" With a broken heart, I gazed at her. I wish it wasn't. The agents moved forward. A badge was produced by one of them. At last, Harrison's mask broke. He spat. "You've ruined everything." I grinned. "Harrison, no, you did. All I'm doing is making sure that everyone sees it." The agents took up residence. He made no effort to resist, simply gazed at me, hollow-eyed and wide-eyed. He appeared tiny, deflated. As they cuffed him, he turned his head. "I loved you," he muttered. "My way." To ensure that only he could hear, I slightly leaned in. "Your method was never sufficient. The man I was meant to marry was suddenly handcuffed and led down the aisle. He never even reached the vows." The guests dispersed. A few hurried away. Others remained, unable to decide whether they were impressed or appalled. Some simply filmed everything, as if it were live theater. Already, Rebecca had crept out the side door. Astute girl. However, I had also expected that. There were individuals outside with my private investigator. Her progress would be limited. I returned to the wedding suite and removed the necklace Diana had given me that morning, which was a string of pearls from the Montgomery family. On my skin, it felt like ice. A remnant of a life that I never desired again. Gently, I set them on the table. They were no longer mine. Not at all. I refrained from crying. Not once. Rather, I observed the mayhem below from the window. Flashing cameras. Reporters are asking a lot of questions. The thronging crowd. I caught a glimpse of Harrison being pushed into the rear of a black SUV somewhere in the haze. He was losing everything he had worked so hard to achieve, including his flawless life. And me? I sensed. Free. The news quickly made headlines. Jilted bride exposes billionaire fraud ring at altar the woman who brought down Montgomery Enterprises in her wedding dress. I received requests for endorsements, book deals, and interviews. I paid them all no attention. For a time. Because the cacophony no longer impresses you after being deceived so deeply and loved that superficially. All you want is quiet, space. The truth, I relocated to a different apartment, tidy, very little, looking out over Central Park, which Harrison famously criticized as being too flashy. The irony was delicious. Within a week, the lawsuits were filed. The SEC probe grew. As it happens, Harrison had been playing half the city in addition to lying to me. I also had the invoices. Claire gave a call. Each day, she had a distinct, roar voice. She didn't beg for pardon, just understanding. I had no idea, she repeated. Sophia, I promise you, I was unaware. I trusted her. Finally. Because Claire was the one person who truly loved Harrison. Realizing that the person you held in high regard was always hollow on the inside is a different kind of anguish. My door was knocked on 3 days after the non-wedding. Diana was the one, weary, pale, holding the pearl-encrusted velvet box. They are yours, she declared, her eyes glistening. You revealed the reality. You are therefore more Montgomery than anyone has ever been. They were not taken by me. Then, no. I prepared us tea instead. For a long period, we sat in silence. She cried. I gave her permission, and we changed into something else in that instant. Not adversaries, not in-laws. Two ladies grieving the same delusion after being blindsided by the same man. The weeks that followed passed slowly. It wasn't sorrow, not precisely. It was quieter and colder, like being in the center of a house that had burned down and sorting through the things that the fire had not destroyed. And knowing that perhaps it saved you. Like dominoes, Montgomery Enterprises fell apart. Every file I turned in had unlocked a new trap. Harrison had been using borrowed time and fabricated balance statements to develop his empire, it turns out. And the others followed as one story collapsed. The news stories continued. Montgomery Air faces fraud and conspiracy charges. The SEC investigates whistleblower bride and names her a key witness. I was silent at first. Give the storm time to pass. Allow them to devour one another. The phone then began to ring, not solely from the media, from legal practices, from business leaders, from those who wished to learn from the lady who overthrew a dynasty to avoid becoming the next cautionary story. It caught me off guard. It wasn't something I planned. I did, however, say yes, because I had a purpose all of a sudden. Not retaliation, not celebrity, something more robust. Clarity, Claire continued to call, and I continued to pick up. I didn't have to. However, I did so because I wanted to. In a sense, it was even more devastating because her world had also fallen apart. Harrison had been her childhood, her blood, and her guardian. He was now merely a case number. She asked if we might meet one evening. Two women with weary eyes and too much history sat across from one another in a tiny cafe in Soho. Her voice cracked as she replied, I should have seen it. I ought to have asked more questions. No, I said while brewing my tea. You cherished him. That isn't illegal. She raised her head. However, that didn't deter you. We couldn't do what you did. I was unsure of how to respond to that. I simply nodded. Choosing to stop lying for someone is sometimes necessary to survive them. I formally opened my firm 3 months after the wedding that wasn't. A laptop, and an inbox full of unresolved controversies were the only things involved at first. Investors weren't necessary. Didn't require Harrison's funds. The truth and a reputation for never blinking were all I needed. I had clients in 4 cities in a matter of weeks. This phenomenon was dubbed the Montgomery effect. At the altar, a woman wearing a silk dress drops the hammer on a corporate heir. Yes, that tale spreads. Strangely, it also heals. Because everyone remembered my purpose each time I entered a boardroom. For what followed, not for the controversy. Put in order, openness, modification. I was most startled by Diana. She visited my office 3 days after Harrison was indicted. The same pearls, the same poise. Her voice was taut with determination as she declared, I want to start a foundation, one that encourages business ethics, scholarships, instruction, a legacy based on accountability as well as power. Before she could finish her statement, I said, yes. She gave it Harrison's grandmother's name. She was the same woman who wore the pearls that weighed heavily on my collarbone the morning I walked down the aisle toward transformation and disaster. Pledging out was Rebecca Matthews. She did, of course. 5 years. Sentence reduction, agreement for cooperation. With her flawless manicure tapping on court documents like spreadsheet cells, she gave a detailed testimony against Harrison. She never gave me a look, not once. However, I observed her, nearly, not with malice, out of interest. Because she's liked by others? They always believe they are the most intelligent person present, until the silence falls and the truth is all that remains. Blake made contact. Once. An email with 2 lines. I wasn't fully informed. I promise. I didn't respond. He was well aware. Nevertheless, he laughed. It was almost a year before the trial started. Harrison used every legal gimmick in the book to postpone it. Motions. Extensions. Allegations of mental exhaustion. Justice, however, never grows weary. The courtroom was crowded when the trial finally started. There was a reporter from every major outlet. Students at every business school were watching, like it was the Super Bowl. I took a seat next to Claire in the gallery. Harrison refused to look at me. I didn't cry when I stood up, didn't make a mistake. I took the court through the chronology, including the records, the discussions, and the intricate web of lies he skillfully crafted. Diana then took the stage. Her voice was as solid as stone as she sat with her back straight in a pale suit. The truth must stand above blood, she stated, addressing her son directly. Harrison's face broke at that moment. I witnessed it. The realization that he was losing more than simply a business. The last person who still had faith in him was leaving. The jury returned quickly. I feel guilty. On every level, 15 years. No parole. Harrison did not recoil as the judge read it out loud. He only gazed at the table before him as if it had also deceived him. Rebecca received a 5. Blake received community service and penalties. Me? Peace came to me. We didn't weep that evening. We opened a bottle of the same champagne we had previously ordered for the wedding when we got together at Diana's house. With tears in her eyes, Claire lifted her glass. In her own words, to the sister I never had, who became more family than my own brother. I didn't make toast. I simply grinned. For what reason do you say that at that time? You remain silent. You simply let the truth to shine brightly in the middle of the space. There was no silence following the trial. Their form changed. Front page coverage of the controversy subsided. But what about the fallout? Those persisted. Other businesses became anxious. As they gazed at their golden boys, families began to wonder what secrets lay beneath their flawless grins. And me? I continued to move, one step at a time. My consultancy business expanded more quickly than I anticipated. One customer became 5, then 20. In the first year, I opened offices in Singapore and London. It turns out that people think you know what you're doing when you deconstruct a billion-dollar fraud ring while wearing a wedding gown by Vera Wang. They're correct, too. Since I had actually lived the lie, slept next to it. Good night, I kissed it. And now? From a mile away, I could see it coming. No games in the boardroom, no glitzy public relations strategies. The truth, weighty as iron, unyielding, and cutting. I provided them with that. 6 months later, Claire came to work for my firm. With fire in her eyes and a folder under one arm, she entered. She said, I want to help you fix what he broke. She also did. She knew the Montgomery enterprise better than anyone. Nobody put forth more effort to rebuild it. Not as a dynasty, but as a representation of openness. She entirely rebranded a tiny division that she had taken over. She spoke at the quarterly review, and I can still picture her with her shoulders back and her voice calm. She said that we've implemented every audit protocol and retained 80% of our workforce. This is only the start. Yes, it was. Diana also changed. The calm matriarch who sat next to her son at galas was no longer there. She was replaced by a woman who made billionaires tremble by looking down company boards. She established a business ethics foundation that promotes reform, advocacy, and scholarships. She had the pearls from that wedding day put on display in the entryway of the foundation in a glass case. Below them was a plaque that said, Let truth take precedence over tradition. People were halted. Each and every time, I received invitations to speak at Columbia, Wharton, and Stanford. Ethics classes now required students to read The Montgomery Case. My lectures covered human blindness, in addition to fraud avoidance, about the possibility of masks being worn by those closest to you, about how integrity is necessary for true love to last. A young woman with red-rimmed eyes came up to me after we had a conversation. Our CFO and I are engaged, she muttered. I discovered discrepancies last week. I gave my card to her. She revealed a plan 2 weeks later that would have cost her business millions of dollars. I received a thank you note from her. Her maiden name was used to sign it. I used to think Harrison was the strong one, Claire remarked, as she leaned over to check case files one day. I gave her a look. I remarked, he was never strong. He simply had the appearance of a man we were taught to trust. She gave a nod. You demonstrated true strength for us. I had no idea how to respond to that. Let's finish what we started, I simply said. 1 year following the non-wedding, I addressed a Columbia class. After finishing a lecture, I observed a man in the third row. He had dark eyes and salt and pepper hair, and he seemed to be trying to figure out what I was saying. Then he identified himself. He said, Professor Marcus Chin, Stanford visiting professor. I will never forget that. You should be writing the curriculum, he said after pausing. Suddenly, a new chapter was underway. It was all professional at first. Collaborative research, lengthy emails. Curriculum outlines are exchanged along with track modifications and polite remarks. However, something else blossomed somewhere in those adjustments. He never hurried me, never pressed. Simply listen. He didn't simply see the headlines. He saw the entire tale. And he didn't flinch at all. I told him everything over coffee one evening. Not just the court dates and correspondence, but also how it felt, falling in love with someone who used you as leverage. With a burning heart and trembling hands, she stood by herself in a silk gown. He inhaled deeply. I'm grateful, he said. For entrusting that to me, we continued to collaborate. Dinners turned into days. Inside jokes were created from case studies. And gradually, the barrier I had erected around my heart, it remained intact. It melted. Claire was the first to notice. One afternoon, she remarked, You're smiling more. Like genuine smiles. It's strange. At a board meeting, Diana even arched an eyebrow. She claimed, He looks at you as if he sees you. As a person, not as a symbol. She was not mistaken. The woman who exposed Montgomery Enterprises was not how Marcus viewed me. I just caught his eye. And that was horrifying after all of that. But lovely, together, we introduced the National Ethics Curriculum. It was accepted by colleges in a matter of months. The foundation became popular all around the world. Marcus was by my side the entire time, never in front of me or behind. Only with me. He turned to face me under an old oak tree one evening, as we were strolling through Central Park in the rain. I am in awe of you, he said. Not to survive, but to remain open. for continuing to have faith in possibilities. I chuckled. You're saying I'm still naive? He brushed my hair out of my face and replied, No, you remain true. There is a distinction. And then, breathless and saturated, with the past following me like a fog, I recognized. I had had enough of waiting for Harrison to fade. I was already letting go. I was in front of a mirror once more, 3 years after leaving Harrison at the altar. The same female, an alternative white dress. This one was easier. No lace, no corset, no delusion, only silk, gentle, tidy. Actual. Diana repositioned my veil, her eyes gleaming with peace, which had not been there before. Everything is exactly as it should be this time, she muttered. Claire brought a bottle of champagne and peered in. Out there, Marcus is essentially floating. Additionally, half of Columbia's ethics department was present, so you should see the visitors. We chuckled. Since we could now, Marcus and I had our first coffee conversation on ethics at the Botanical Gardens, where we later got married. The list of guests was modest. Not a press, no show, only those who were important. Additionally, the vows were different. He didn't promise to keep you safe. I will stand with you, he said. Always. I didn't promise to be yours. I'll be mine and still choose you, I declared. And that meant more in some way. Diana gave me a little package at the end of the ceremony. Montgomery pearls. Grinning, I carefully shut the lid. They now, in my opinion, belong to the foundation. As a reminder of our progress, she gave a tearful nod. You're the woman I wish I had been, not just the daughter I never had. My life's next phase involved more than just love. It had to do with purpose. The foundation grew internationally. Our ethics course was adopted by major universities as a standard. Whistleblowers made contact. Before being discovered, executives began speaking the truth. Marcus and I took a stroll in the grounds one evening following a gala. When the petals were falling and string lights were in the air, he inquired, Have you ever considered how your life could have turned out if you hadn't heard Harrison that evening? I glanced at him, the man who never batted an eye and saw every part of me. My life wasn't ruined by that night, I said. It made it clear. I stood in front of my Stanford class a year later. I told the story the last time. It was the change, not the wedding scandal. I smiled as I concluded the talk and shared a reality that I had worked 5 years to acquire. Devastation isn't the best form of retaliation. Reconstruction is being placed, not by destroying it, but by creating something sincere out of the ashes. I sat in my office after class with my hand lying on my swollen belly. Our very first child, a secret still, for the time being. Before they can blossom, some stories require silence. Diana asked us out to supper the evening before Harrison's parole hearing. He had requested an apology. In the right way. I paused. Claire was on his side. Diana didn't press. So I went with Marcus. He had changed appearance. Thinner, less noisy. Actual. He dressed simply. No timepiece, no mask. And his expression softened in a way I had never seen before when he saw our baby, resting soundly in her carrier. He muttered, She has your eyes. Determined. He read something from a folded piece of paper over dessert. Sophia learned the truth about me the night before our wedding. I want her to hear who I've grown into tonight. To return what I took, not to get anything back. Honor. Show respect. The freedom to truly believe in oneself. I refrained from crying. However, something unknotted within of me. It's not that I pardoned him, but because I no longer had to despise him. He requested if he might say something to our daughter as we were leaving. Your mom taught me the most important thing I'll ever know. Truth doesn't break people, he said in a whisper while kneeling next to her carrier. It develops them. We then ventured out into the darkness. Not much fanfare. Nothing but silence. Now, years later, I don't emphasize the betrayal when I tell this story. If I tell it at all. Not to say I do, but to declare I won't. I discussed the time I stood at the altar. I'm not going to be used. I will not be silent. I refuse to compromise my truth for ease. Since then, I haven't. I didn't get the life I had planned because of the truth. I got something better from it. A life I selected. A family I worked for. I created a purpose. My daughter will ask me why I never allow lies to prevail one day. I'll also share this with her. because I was broken by the truth I heard one night. But I listened instead of breaking. I then took a step forward, into the light, and I didn't go back. I appreciate you sharing this journey with me.